In this video, we talk about the vastly underrated The Vast of Night. Welcome to another episode of Anchor's Points. I am ANCHORPETE, and I am with my beautiful co-host, Shari T.
Hello.
She's also my wife. And we like to talk about movies, TV shows, comic books, and novels that you might have heard of, but not enough people are talking about. The Vast of Night is a perfect example of this. It came out in 2019 in a few festivals, but it made its main debut in 2020. It is currently available on Amazon Prime for free. You can go watch it right now. Why don't you go do that before you get into our spoiler-filled review. It was written and directed by Andrew Patterson. He co-wrote the movie with Craig W. Sanger. The movie is his directorial debut. It's his first movie. I think it's quite an accomplishment. What do you think, Shari?
Absolutely. This movie came out in 2019. It won the Narrative Film Audience Award at the Slamdance Film Festival. And when I looked into this, he had entered the film into 18 film festivals and been rejected by all of them. And I think that's awesome that he kept trying, because that would have broke my little heart after maybe the fifth time or something. So I'm really glad he hung in there, because he's really talented, and this movie is one of the best of 2020. It's set in a fictional small town in New Mexico, but it was actually filmed in Texas. We live in Texas, so that was I thought that was kind of cool when I saw that, the town of Whitney, Texas, which is only about an hour and a half away from Austin. I wonder if I've even maybe driven through or something. But when I was watching it, it was a very small town. It did remind me of small towns in Texas. Anyway, that's the setting. And the setting, I think, plays a big part in this movie in getting a feel for this movie. An important thing to know about this movie is that it's not a story that's new. The idea of aliens coming to the Earth is not a new idea. It's how it's told that's new and interesting and original.
The very first shot is like a TV screen, but it's sort of a retro-futuristic TV screen, and it has the title The Vast of Night. The Vast of Night is the name of an episode of a show.
Paradox Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, which it was kind of like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. It's framed just like the Twilight Zone. There's a narrator. He's given a description of how you entered into the Paradox Theater, and it sounds just like Rod Serling talking about the Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it shows a black and white image at first, and the very first image in the movie after that TV screen is our main protagonist,
Everett, who is played by Jake Horowitz.
Yeah.
Who you really don't get much of a good look at his face throughout this film. I don't know if I would recognize him if I saw him in another movie or on the street or anything, but that's part of what's interesting about this film. It's set in the 50s, and it reminded me so much of like Orson Welles in War of the Worlds, or like almost like radio theater.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Throughout the movie, they cut back to that TV screen feel where all of a sudden it looks like a classic Twilight Zone episode. It's in black and white. It's got almost like that fish eye lens look, of those old Twilight Zone episodes. And there's quite a few instances throughout this movie where there's nothing on the screen whatsoever.
It just goes black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What Shari's talking about with the movie being so unique is the choices on how it's filmed, right? There's quite a few sequences where it's like a close-up of someone's face, but it's not their face head on, right? So you couldn't recognize the main character. Then there's like scenes where, a person might be a close-up on a character, but she's talking to multiple people through a phone. So really the dialogue is what is moving the plot forward.
The basic plot is that this is a small town. Everyone's gathering for the night for a basketball game,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the town is going to be in a gymnasium. The main character there are two main characters, Everett and what's her name? Fay. Fay is the girl, and they're friends. And they meet up at the basketball game prior to the game starting, and there's a long shot of them talking and walking to their jobs. They leave the basketball game. They both have night jobs, where he's a radio DJ and she is a switchboard operator at night. And they walk to each other. He walks her to her job and he goes to his job. And this town is so small, you can walk to everything, which is important as the plot goes on, because they run all over the town in this movie. It becomes also an important plot point that everyone in the town, most of the people in the town, are at this gymnasium because that provides an opportunity for outsiders to arrive.
So you already know it's about aliens, right? And I actually get creeped out by alien things. I was much more scared of alien movies when I was younger. Like signs really bothered me. I couldn't even watch Fire in the Sky. Like I think it would probably, traumatize me for life.
Fire in the Sky is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, and this movie captures that feeling of like you don't know what's happening. You're only getting little snippets of information. And I feel like that's what would happen if you weren't directly involved with an alien encounter. Like you just kind of hear reports, and the way that people describe things like really increases the tension, right? So basically what happens is Everett's working at his radio station and Fay is commanding a switchboard, and while she's commanding a switchboard, she gets this call from a woman that says there's something in the sky. That's kind of like that Kecksburg UFO incident. And then basically she hears this weird noise.
She also keeps having calls get dropped. There's like a really long sequence of her taking the calls, and I think that's where the movie really starts to build tension, by the way. Like, it's just the things she hears on the switchboard. And they've established that this girl is into, like, science and technology.
Yeah.
And so's the guy. Those two friends are into those kinds of things. And she's really level-headed as she's taking all the calls. And, in a different kind of movie, a person might get really panicked, but she's really calm and level-headed, and she's actually trying to figure out the problem. And she tells her friend who's at the radio station down the street, this is going on. What do you think could be going on? And they actually try to figure it out. Whereas people who are calling in are like, I'm going to the cellar. There's something in the sky. And the words, there's something in the sky, you'll hear that a million times in an alien movie, but it's just very creepy in this movie.
So throughout the movie, there's just close-ups of them in dark rooms by themselves, and then just shots where there's this one shot after they're at their jobs where it like goes between them and it just pans throughout the whole town, and you just see how empty the town is. And for someone that's seen a lot of horror movies, that panning through the town almost feels like, you're a creature kind of going through the town, right? Or, something's hunting it. And it's this great long tracking shot, but it just shows how desolate and alone they are. And I think that's what this movie capitalizes on. That's what you're talking about, is that it's just this sense of like, you're just by yourself, you're dealing with something way bigger, and it's the vast of night, it's the dead of night. And it's not even that late, it's like 7 something at night, right?
I was going to talk about that. I was going to talk about that tracking shot because it's really impressive. It goes on for a pretty long time, and it does look like it goes through the entire town and into the gymnasium, all around everybody. And by the way, I love the period setting. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not in your face 50s, like Grease or something. It's like subtle. Probably, it's kind of realistic, probably. The women are wearing like some cat eye like glasses, and there's the fluffy skirts, and there's ponytails, but like kind of what normal people would probably look like. So these two teenagers kind of have this burden on their shoulders of like what to do and who should they alert, and should they alert anybody? Is it worthwhile? Or is this, how serious is this situation? And one of the calls they get becomes like a catalyst for them deciding to move forward with kind of an investigation, and it's from a guy named Billy. He was like in the military, and he worked on some sort of top secret operation, and his story it's a little hair-raising. I started to feel freaked out and frightened by his story, even though it's told by this like sensible, logical man. Yeah. And the voice is actor Bruce Davis, very effective, and he deserves a nod, because even without showing him, he's effective. His story leads to another caller, who is an elderly woman who lives in the town, and she wants them to come over to her house right now and hear what she has to say. And they're excited. This is one of the most exciting things that's probably ever happened to them. They live in this small town of like 400 or 500 people. And this actress is played by Gail Cronauer, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. But this is another situation where they don't show her face exactly. And when they finally do, the close-up is striking because there have been hardly any close-ups. Like, I read a review of this that said in old movies, a close-up really mattered. When they did a close-up, it was important, and this movie kind of brings that back because they don't do close-ups hardly at all. You hardly get a good look at anyone, and so when they do a close-up, it has a lot of impact. And that's cool, because I totally noticed when they did this close-up on that actress. Anyway, she tells the story of her own son's abduction.
The reason why this is so chilling is because Billy's story and her story, they are like essentially referencing two different types of UFO contact that people claim to have a lot of the time. Billy's story is like the idea of a military officer being part of some kind of cover-up, and they get little glimpses of alien technology, right? We've heard this kind of stuff with Roswell, with Area 51. It's the kind of stuff that you only get little pieces of, right? But your imagination fills in the gaps. And so there's Billy's story that with the military aspect, and then this woman's story with her kid kind of goes along with the UFO abductee type of story.
Very close encounters of the third kind thing where her son is taken.
Right. And so, like, if you're like me, where, like, I personally don't think that we get, that people are abducted frequently and that aliens come down and abduct people.
You don't believe in aliens?
I absolutely believe in aliens, right? Not even just the xenomorphs, but I absolutely believe in aliens that, like, they exist in our universe, in our galaxy, but, like, they're not just, like, coming to Earth and leaving, coming to Earth. I don't think that's the case. Well, I mean, what about you?
I'm just going to say the same thing I would say about God. I don't know.
So before I mentioned that the movie reminds me of Signs, right? And the thing that reminded me of Signs so much is the actual signal sound that you hear from the aliens, from the people in the sky in this movie. It's very reminiscent of, like, Signs, where you hear the aliens clicking on the baby monitor, right? And the reason why it's so much like Signs is because you're getting a first-person account of, like, what's happening while there's this big thing happening, right? You have people from outer space, you know, above this town, and that's like a big scale thing that we might see in a movie, but we're really getting this intimate view of it from these two characters. I just think that, like, that intimate view combined with the fact that, like, it's just these two characters kind of by themselves in this desolate situation, I think it just is a really effective combination. Like I said before, there's a couple of moments where the picture is gone, and I just pictured seeing this in the movie theater where there's no light, you just hear sound. I'd be shitting my pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't take that.
Yeah, and this movie's PG-13, and it's not touted as a horror movie, and it's not horror, but it is chilling. And
yeah.
I also want to say, I want to make sure we're clear that there's a sense of wonder here too. Like, it reminds me of Signs, but it also reminded me of Close Encounters of the Third Kind because it's sort of adventurous and exciting as well.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that it's these two teenage kids, like, taking on this adventure or this situation. But I found a sense of wonder and eeriness at the same time in this movie, which is unusual, I think, to feel both of those things. And again, it's a big compliment to the writer-director.
They're abducted by the aliens, right? But the ambiguity is, like, is this a bad thing? Like, is it bad that they were abducted by the aliens? Are they going to be experimented on? Or is it like, well, now they have this truth, and maybe it's going to be a positive ending, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
I think we're just, you know, again, we're not going to know that, but I think we're supposed to feel like the awe and the smallness of who we are as humans on Earth, that there's so much more out there.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the title, The Vast of Night. And those words are not said in the movie. That I think that title is meant to give you that sense of you're the little tiny thing in this giant, you know, universe. And that's the way the end of the movie makes me feel. I actually wasn't worried for the characters because it didn't seem like a scary, bad thing to me.
I think that, like, the ship that we see at the end, I think that the ship's design in itself made me not feel as creeped out too.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds weird, but, like, the ship itself is kind of more reminiscent of Close Encounters of the Third Kind versus kind of like what in our modern movies we try to make alien ships like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time in modern movies, the aliens are sinister, right? So I think because it was sort of like this E.T. Close Encounters of the Third Kind type mothership, I think you could have that kind of positive ending.
I want to say he made this film on a $700,000 budget, and he funded a lot of it himself, and it's, like I said, just super impressive.
Dude, how did he do the mothership and stuff with the $700,000?
I know.
Holy God.
I don't know.
Wow.
He's a talented dude.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Well,
and we did say the girl Fay's name. Her name's Sierra McCormick, and she's really good.
yeah.
She has one of the best scenes, I think, that switchboard operating scene.
Yeah. Well, that's our discussion on The Vast of Night. Make sure that you check our channel for the month of February. Shari and I are going to do some more reviews of short stories. But until then, keep looking up to the stars.